Coming up.
Space cargo launches.
Space stuff sells.
And there's a lake on that dwarf planet. All that. And we'll be talking, is the International Space Station actually worth it? Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tomorrow, episode 9.11. We're very glad to have you here today on March 26th, 2016. And before we get the show started, of course, we want to give a nice big shout out to our patrons of Tomorrow, which in this specific slate that you are seeing, these are our patrons who gave us $10 or more. So these are Tomorrow Premier members. They get access to all the fun goodies that we throw out to our Patreon members and all the fun stuff that they get to see all day and stuff that we get to post early, like our space pods going up early, immediate access to After Dark, and all the other good, wonderful things that come with that. And we are here today. Ben, you'll notice, is not with us, but he is actively watching us right now. As you can see, our dear leader over my left shoulder right there. We can even take a close-up look at Ben watching the show live right now. It's just kind of staying there. And of course, I am your host for today, Jared Head, because Ben is back in Florida doing things, which of course we will just say he's doing things. And then to my right, I have the lovely, the talented, the amazing, the not my wife, Carrie Ann Higginbotham. So glad to have you here today. And of course, to my left, we have the man, the myth, the legend himself from the mythical lands of Arizona. We've got Space Mike hanging out with us today. Good to see you, Space Mike.
Thank you. Apparently I'm from the Irish section of Arizona. I didn't know that even existed.
Yeah, that's where you are from. And speaking of Space Mike, you're actually going to lead us off on our show today with our first story about a launch. Go for it,
That's
Space
right.
Mike.
We have a really cool launch that took place last week, and this was, this week, and this was an Atlas V launch, which launched a Cygnus cargo spacecraft bound for the International Space Station. Check out the footage.
There we go.
There we go.
Liftoff of the Atlas V rocket with Cygnus. Supplies for the crew, experiments for the science.
This launched from Cape Canaveral at Space Launch Complex 41 on March 23rd at 3:05 Coordinated Universal Time. And this was the second time that United Launch Alliance launched the Cygnus spacecraft, standing in for orbital ATK's own Antares rocket until modifications to the Antares first stage are completed later this year. The RD-180 main engine, which powered its 68th Atlas launch, concluded its firing actually just 4 minutes after liftoff. But when it shut down, it actually shut down 5 seconds prematurely compared to other pre-flight predictions for this flight. And because of that, it robbed the flight of a lot of thrust and speed that the final 5 seconds would have given during that flight. And we actually have some footage of the Centaur stage when it was going through this stage. During BECO, when the booster cut off its engine, the Centaur stage had to pretty much compensate for that lack of delta V. And because of that, the Centaur was going to burn for 14 minutes long, but ended up burning for 15 minutes so that Cygnus could get into its intended orbit. The Cygnus spacecraft, which is named the SS Rick Husband and designated OA-6 for the Commercial Resupply Services mission, is carrying 3,395 kilograms, or if you're in the United States, 7,485 pounds of cargo to the International Space Station. And about 2 hours and 6 minutes after launch, Cygnus deployed its solar panels and began a series of thruster firings to rendezvous with the International Space Station. And interestingly, the Cygnus spacecraft is carrying a lot of really interesting science experiments, which our own correspondent Lisa Stojanovsky talked about in a really great space pod this past week, which I hope that you've all checked out. And she's actually going to be joining us later on in the show for our main topic. But today, actually, early this morning on Saturday, the Cygnus spacecraft was able to rendezvous with the International Space Station. And we have some footage of that rendezvous and grapple with the space station, where the space station's robotic arm grabbed onto the Cygnus and actually did a very long procedure to dock the Cygnus to the International Space Station. But it was grappled at 10:51 Coordinated Universal Time this morning, and it was finally mated to the Unity module of the International Space Station at 2:52 Coordinated Universal Time. And we have a picture, which was supplied by NASA, of that final berthing when that took place. So congratulations to Orbital ATK for a successful mission so far, and to United Launch Alliance for the successful launch, despite all of the problems. And it just goes to show that it's great that the Centaur was able to compensate for that lack of performance. But yeah, that's what's been going on lately. That was the really cool launch this week.
Yeah, pretty awesome, and also great that they were able to overcome those 5 seconds. A lot of people were like, 5 seconds, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
But, 5 seconds at the end of your burn, that's a lot of velocity that you end up missing. It was great to see Centaur overcome that. I believe they also did delay the next Atlas V launch a little bit in order to go over the data. I believe they were launching MUOS 5, and they were going to do it sometime at the end of April, and now it's going to mid-May because they just want to check to make sure that everything's okay before they launch another one, because MUOS 5, very heavy, and to geosynchronous, geosynchronous transfer orbit. So obviously you want to have all the delta V that you can have with that there. So
absolutely,
very cool
I
stuff.
hadn't heard about that yet. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very cool. And speaking of stuff, Carrie Ann,
Yes.
you're going to tell us about some stuff.
That's exactly the way Ben would hand off
Some
to me.
literal
That's
stuff.
so perfect. I love it. So for those of you who like stuff and space stuff at that,
I do.
actually, I mean, I'm not like a big stuff person, but I could see some interest in this. There's going to be a space stuff auction going on, well, I mean, for lack of a better term. Space memorabilia, I suppose, is a much better term for it. Going on April 2nd, which is next Saturday. So I figured I should tell you about that now, so you can get your bids in now, so that maybe you can get some of this stuff. It's really awesome. I think we have some pictures. I'm not really sure. Thank you, because I need to look at notes.
Look at the patches.
Yeah, so this is going off for the U.S. Spacewalk of Fame in Titusville, Florida. Like I said, the auction's going to be April 2nd, I wrote 15, but it's actually 16. It's a memorabilia auction. There's 200 or so lots, give or take, from about 8 different astronauts. There's anything and everything you could possibly imagine here. There are stickers, patches, pictures, manuals. There's access badges. There's even, I don't remember which picture it is, but there's even a picture. There you go, that one. This is a light. If I remember correctly, it's like a walkway light. There's multiple pictures for it, which is hilarious. So you can see it from different angles, so you know exactly the kind of light you're getting / where it used to be. It's kind of amazing. And there's all different things from Gemini, Apollo, Skylab, Shuttle, you name it, it's going to be there. It really, really interesting. A lot of things that are signed. The access badges are kind of cool. There's multiple like VAB badges. Sort of things are allotted and grouped together. And then some things are just individual items like that light, for instance.
I like that. That's pretty cool.
I know, it's so weird and quirky. I just kind of want it.
Yeah.
Because I just kind of want it.
Like if somebody comes over, you're like, hey, wonder where that light came from?
Right, like why do you have this ugly light, man? Like it doesn't even turn on. Like what's the deal?
Hey, man,
Looks like
this
you
was on the
stole.
original gantry way that the Mercury of astronauts
Right,
walked on.
then-
So that actually
And that's
is pretty
very
cool.
cool.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Alan Shepard walked under
So-
that.
Where can people find out more information about this stuff?
So if you want to, you can just donate straight up to the museum, which is awesome, which is spacewalkoffame.com. Or if you want to go ahead and participate in this I was gonna say,
Auction
in
and
this
bidding?
stuff sale. Sorry, that just got stuck in my head. You hit invaluable.com and search for Spacewalk of Fame is kind of the easiest way to do it. And all of the items were donated, so all of the proceeds are going to the museum, which is very cool. And they're using the money to do some upgrades on some of their permanent displays and stuff like that. So that's what the money's going towards. And their permanent displays, the things that they have on permanent display, are not being touched. These are all sort of like extra items that got donated very specifically, so the proceeds can go right back to the museum. So that's a very cool thing. So if you
good
like stuff, you can get some. So there,
Very, very cool. And speaking of stuff,
other stuff.
we can also talk about some really cold stuff
Yes.
on the outskirts of our solar system. because this week there was a very big conference called, I'm gonna mess it up here unless I read it right in front of everybody, the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, which is basically when all of the people who do like studies of the planets and stuff come together and they're like, here's all my stuff that I've done. I'm going to present it, and you all can take a look at it. So one of the cool results that they were talking about this week was out on Pluto, and because Ben is here, I can say without a doubt that we are going to look at the surface of dwarf planet Pluto.
He's dying right now.
Let's take a look at this image right here. This is something that New Horizons, the spacecraft that flew by Pluto on July 14th, 2015, has appeared to spot, which it looks like a frozen lake on the surface of Pluto. So they're speculating that it's about 30 kilometers at its widest, and it's a large, smooth area in the middle of a mountain range north of Sputnik Planum, which is the heart that we all so love on the surface of Pluto. And it's actually one of several similar features that have been seen on Pluto that also include potential river channels on Pluto. Now, what could this possibly be made out of? Well, the scientists are confident that what you're looking at is basically a frozen lake of liquid nitrogen. Under the conditions that Pluto would have had maybe several billion, even millions of years ago, with the temperature and the atmospheric pressure that they would have speculated and hypothesized would be on Pluto, they think that actually liquid nitrogen could have been on the surface of Pluto. There was also a discussion of a liquid nitrogen ocean on the surface of Pluto, but they're just talking about the lake definitively for now. So some very, very awesome stuff that's happening on the outer solar system. Very cold liquids, though. We're talking like below 200 degrees Celsius. So.
The chat room's like, oh, so Lake Tahoe on Pluto.
Yes, Lake Tahoe on Pluto. It's beautiful. You just got to go there and visit that. It's so nice. And speaking of really cold stuff,
Other cold stuff?
Other cold stuff. Space Mike, tell us about some cold stuff.
Well, I'm not necessarily sure it's cold. I guess it depends on your perspective. It was kind of launched from a pretty cold place, but Russia had a kind of a secret rocket launch that they took place, and this was in northern Russia from their Plesetsk Cosmodrome. And this was a military launch launching a spy satellite. This was the Bars-M satellite. This launched on a Soyuz 2-1A rocket on Thursday, specifically from launch site 43/4, and it launched at 9:42 Coordinated Universal Time. The satellite is designed to produce wider angle images of the Earth than Russia's previous reconnaissance satellites, such as Persona, and its images have a lower resolution than its counterparts, and so it can be used for cartography and analysis of larger areas. And this mission was hosted by Russia's Ministry of Defense. That's why we're seeing all these guys in the video here wearing military uniforms, and actually why we didn't have much notice of this launch. We had, I believe it was about 24 hours notice that this launch was even going to take place. So that was very cool. And something else that was interesting about the satellite is that it features the ability to downlink its images digitally instead of using a capsule. But anyway, let's watch the launch here. Very cool. Very brief. It was kind of short footage there, but it was very cool to see that. And the fact that the Russian Ministry of Defense posted that video publicly. So that's very cool that they were able to share that. And something like I was saying with the satellite, it's able to download its images electronically. And up until 2005, Russian spy satellites still used film and had a return capsule that returned them through the atmosphere and with parachutes and recovered later. Up until 2005, film! So over the past decade, they haven't really had any type of satellites like this. So this is kind of getting that back started. And this is actually the second in the series of the Bars-M series of satellites. So very interesting and very cool launch. Russia is on a roll right now. That's what, 4 launches so far this month that Russia's pulled off successfully. So
yeah,
very cool.
Good for them. Cool. Yeah, they're really doing it. And really, they did capsule return of all of their film into 2005?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how they were able to return the
it's
first
not broken,
early
all right?
pictures. They had a return capsule, and they would take as many pictures as they could, and they would have that, have the film be already kind of loaded in this canister, and then it would separate and it had a heat shield and everything, so it could
Wow.
survive re-entry and parachute. And on certain satellites, I believe some of them even had some kind of retro rockets on them, kind of like the Soyuz capsule has a very brief
then.
retro rocket right before it touches down on the ground. And that was only for the largest versions. And even their early space stations, the Almaz stations, the military ones, had return capsules for all the images that they took up there as well. So yeah, they've been doing that forever. Like I said, all the way up until 2005.
Yeah,
so.
I think we did that until the 80s with the Hexagon series of spy satellites for the United States, if I remember correctly. And then we went electro-optical, and it sounds like they're finally catching up to that.
In Russia, if not broken, do not fix.
Yes, some really, really interesting stuff that they're doing.
That's amazing.
Now, Carrie Ann, speaking of an interesting person that we have.
So, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but I thought that this was very cool. There is an Instagram account called Everyday Astronaut, and it actually is sort of a project that came from Tim Dodd of Tim Dodd Photography, who's also on Instagram. So Instagram.com/everydayastronaut or Instagram.com/Tim Dodd Photography, Dodd with 2 Ds, D-O-D-D is what I should say. And the Everyday Astronaut has this sort of phrase of saying that he's helping add an A, which is art, to STEM to make it STEAM education. STEM, of course, being science, technology, engineering, and math. And so then we would have science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, which I think is really important. Because the coolest rocket is really cool, but the most beautiful rocket is also kind of inspiring. And if you can combine all of those things together, I think you can get something really cool, really awesome, and really inspiring all at the same time. And so these Instagram photos, it's just this series of an everyday astronaut doing everyday things, like, shopping for Tang, because that's what you need to do.
Obviously.
And one of my favorite things is that the Everyday Astronaut did a little bit of a shout out to Tomorrow, because apparently he watches, and it's kind of a bit of an Easter egg in this particular photo. But as you can see, the Everyday Astronaut is just sitting in his everyday bed, reading everyday things like Kerbal Weekly, and of course Scott Manley would be on the cover. And on the back side, if you can see it, and I'm sure if you go over to Instagram.com/everydayastronaut, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. But on the back cover there's an Orbital Mechanics logo, and there's also a Tomorrow logo. Oh, like that. So very, very cool. I was just completely touched that this was even a shout out in any way, shape, or form. Everyday Astronaut has 127 posts and 24.1 thousand followers, which is amazing. So now our tiny little logo is in front of all of those eyes, which I thought was very, very cool. And it's a really neat project, and I think the Everyday Astronaut really captures sort of the essence of dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have.
Yes.
Kind of thing, in a really sort of endearing and heartwarming way. And I love the project. I think it's really amazing. And I love everything that's happened so far. And there's been a couple of different series and all that other fun stuff. So it's a very, very cool thing. Go ahead and check it out. Hit follow. It won't cost you anything. And it just adds a little lightness to your life.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim, for that awesome shout out with it there. We appreciate that. Yay. That was really, really cool.
Really.
Absolutely.
Now, another cool thing that's happening out on Dwarf Planet Ceres. This one, I can call it a dwarf planet.
This is true.
By far is a dwarf planet. So
we need a crown.
Do we have a live image of Ben at the moment?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know where he is right now.
Do we?
All this talk about dwarf planets.
Yeah, all this talk about dwarf planets. Where is Ben at the moment? Oh, there he is. There he is. Oh, yeah. I guess he's not particularly thrilled about
seems about right.
The fact that he can't say anything back about whatever planet mess Pluto's in.
Sad Keanu sort of situation going on there.
Yeah, oh well. So, yeah, sad Ben. I feel so bad about that. So sorry, Ben.
Well.
But on Ceres, we've got NASA's Dawn mission at Ceres, which has been there for over a year now, doing some incredible science. And it's actually in its lowest orbit now, in its low mapping orbit, which is only about 385 kilometers above the surface of Ceres. And it's been looking in very great detail at a crater there called Akatur Crater. And you know Akatur Crater because it's the one with those bright spots on Ceres. Now, it's about 92 kilometers across, and it's thought that this crater is about 80 million years old. Now, This was an image taken during one of the high mapping orbits when we're still about 2,500 kilometers above the surface. And this week at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, the official high-resolution photos, enhanced photos of those bright spots in the crater came out. And if we can get that up, there it is. There is the closest photo that we have of that bright spot there. Very cool thing. So in the center of that crater, there's a pit. And the bright spots are inside of that pit. And they actually make a little dome up where that bright spot is. And looking at it, at the geometry of the features on that dome, planetary scientists are saying that that's an excellent indicator that there's been recent geological activity, and there may even be activity happening there right now. So this is some very exciting stuff. Those bright spots are thought to be salt deposits using some of the instruments on Dawn. They're very similar to magnesium sulfate, which if you've ever used Epsom salts here on Earth, you're literally looking at the same type of salts happening there on Ceres. So this is pretty exciting stuff, finding salts there, because that means there's something transporting the salts, which means there's probably water on Ceres there, either water ice or outgassing and subliming into water vapor.
Salt gnomes?
No salt gnomes, unfortunately. Yeah, no alien cities either. And I would argue that you don't know if aliens on Ceres are urban dwelling or rural dwelling, so you can't make that decision anymore.
And I've heard it could be bath salts too, so there could be cannibals there too.
Yeah.
Boring.
I was gonna say, well, Ben is in Florida, and if we're gonna talk about bath salts, but anyways, sorry, Florida, I didn't mean it that way. All right. So, I think we're ready to go ahead and head into our first break of the show now that we're done with the news. And when we come back, what is the ISS worth? The International Space Station. Is it actually worth it, or are we just wasting our time? We'll do that when we come back.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. Nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving. The heat keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
And welcome back to Tomorrow. Before we get into our main topic for today, we'd like to thank some more patrons on Tomorrow that donate to us here. These folks are our Tomorrow producers. They've donated $5 or more, and they have access to all the fun stuff we were talking about earlier, immediate access to After Dark, also access to early space pods and early postings of our live show that we are doing right now. If you would like to consider donating to us and giving a contribution, you can go to patreon.com/TMRO. And we are back officially, so we're going to get into our main topic today, which our hashtag for it was ISS Worth. Because we are asking ourselves, is the International Space Station actually worth it? Because every time I see a debate about the current state of spaceflight and everything, there's always that group of people who look at the International Space Station and they just foam at the mouth and they bash it to no end. So this was something that was very pertinent, I feel, too, with the fact that we're now going to be getting back to an increased use of the International Space Station with all the cargo craft beginning to kick it up a notch. And then next year, commercial companies sending their own commercial spacecraft to the International Space Station. So just a couple things about the station with it. It's been continuously occupied for 15 years and 143 days since the arrival of Expedition 1 on the 2nd of November 2000. This is the longest continuous human presence in space. This has surpassed the previous record of 9 years and 357 days held by Mir. It's been visited by astronauts, cosmonauts, and space tourists from 17 different nations. The International Space Station program is a joint project among 5 participating space agencies: NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency as well. And my favorite statistic on here was just how much it actually costs. It is the single most expensive item ever constructed at $150 billion. Billion with a B. That is some that's an expensive piece of hardware to have out in low Earth orbit. So this was NASA's budget of $58.7 billion for the station from 1985 to 2015. Russia is about $12 billion, Europe $5 billion, Japan $5 billion, and Canada $2 billion. And the cost of 36 shuttle flights to build the station, estimated at $1.4 billion each, would be $50.4 billion total. And assuming that 20,000 person days of use from 2000 to 2015 by 2 to 6 person crews, each person day would cost $7.5 million, which is less than half the inflation adjusted $9.6 million per person day for Skylab. So I figure we can go ahead and get this started. I will open it up to whoever would like to start it off first about this.
Well, I'll say really quickly
Sure.
that in the chat room, for Keep is saying, most non-space astro people that I talk to don't know that we even have an International Space Station, which I feel like a lot of people in the chat room are kind of like, yep, I agree. Yes, I'm hitting the same sorts of things. Vax Hedrum is saying, I agree, and I love showing it to people as it flies over. And Vax Hedrum was also excited about the 3D printer that's going to space.
Yes.
And as well as BEAM, which is the Bigelow Aerospace Bigelow Expandable Activity Module. For those of you that didn't know BEAM, because I wasn't positive what it was, so I had to look it up. So the chat room it's interesting, right? Because I think a lot of us who are space geeks who don't always have a space job, right? That, or you're not always surrounded by all your space geeky friends. When you have conversations about it and you are talking about, whether or not we should be going to the moon or Mars or anything along those lines, sometimes we have to sort of back ourselves up a little bit and start at the beginning and say, hey, did you know that there are people in
space right now?
Right now?
Yeah.
I love that website, by the way, how many people are in space right now.com, and it'll just give you a number, which is amazing.
Yep.
And that's really helpful because I don't always know offhand as well. And it is surprising to me as well how many people don't know that that's a thing that exists, that it's a thing that has existed for an extended amount of time.
Yeah, almost 20 years now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I, too, love bringing people out, particularly kids,
Yes.
and say, hey, you see that? You know what that is? That's people.
Yeah, there's people in that. It's the size of an American football field. How many football fields is it? About one. And it's moving at 8 kilometers per second, by the way, in case you wanted to know. So, yeah, it's hauling. So,
Nice.
Yeah, I like to do that, especially up at Griffith, get a big group of people to come out and take a look at it. That's a good way to, especially a very good way to introduce people to human spaceflight, I feel, and maybe get them a little hooked.
I always try to just go out and watch it myself, and just the act of doing that gets your neighbors and people around you just being like, "What are you doing?" And just like, "Oh, the International Space Station's about to pass over." What? And when it does, it's just it's a cool moment.
Yeah,
It's a really cool moment. The nice thing is that that's a wonderful stepping stone or springboard to say, because then somebody can say, well, what are they doing up there? Or like they're up there now. What are they doing up there? And to be completely honest, 9 times out of 10, I fail at that next answer. I don't know exactly what's going on at every single given point in time on the International Space Station. I don't know. I'm not up to date probably as much as I should be on all the latest projects. I know Stoge is probably just kicking me under the table right now if she could on all those different things. But it definitely opens up it's a really nice doorway to discuss the things that have been done on the International Space Station, things that have been done in Skylab, so on and so forth. Is it worth it? I don't know. I guess it depends on your perspective.
Yeah, and go ahead, Space Mike.
It also kind of ties into what is the point? What is the end goal of doing this? And I mean, when NASA was created, I mean, its purpose is to not only find out how that we can get into space, have humans survive in space, and potentially colonize space. I mean, that's actually in like the original charter, back in 1958 when NASA was created. And with all of this, finding out whether or not humans can survive in space, with Skylab and with the International Space Station, NASA has been able to find out a lot of that stuff, and kind of the side effects of that have had a lot of applications here on Earth. For example, the bone marrow loss, or not bone marrow, but just their bone density goes down in microgravity the longer you spend. And a lot of osteoporosis medicine was developed to help the astronauts kind of slow down that process. And elderly people or people with other kind of rare predisposed conditions, have medication that didn't exist 40, 50 years ago. And that's just one example of medications. There have been a whole bunch of other different medications that have had applications here on Earth. And I know one of the big experiments that, people who are pretty well versed in space geekery, I guess, have at least heard of all the protein crystal growth. And because of that, they've been able to check out so many different things because they're able to have bacteria that will be able to grow so much faster in microgravity. And with the protein crystals, they're able to find out so many different ways of finding new enzymes to be able to attack it and look at all sorts of different viruses and bacteria and on all sorts of stuff. And again, I'm not as well versed as I should be. I think that Minnie Stogge is probably the best person to be talking about this.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because Donna then put into the show notes so we could see it. It says Lisa's list of ISS science, International Space Station science, direct benefits of the International Space Station Earth, NeuroArm, a robot arm that performs delicate brain surgeries, removes tumors, fixes arterial malformations, just as dexterous as a surgeon, but doesn't shake. Developed from the Canada Arm technology, same kinds of gearing systems in shoulder, wrist, elbow joints, and the same vision systems. That's really
There's another
freaking
medical
cool.
revolution. That's huge.
Yeah, and just thinking about, especially with that. And also Earth observation, too. It's recently become a platform for Earth observation, like the Rapid Scat system that's on board of the International Space Station. We lost a spacecraft called QuickScat, which was used to look at winds here on Earth and was very important in meteorological model development. And basically, they had a spare instrument lying around, and they said, why don't we just fly this thing and stick it on the ISS? And they're like, that's a brilliant idea. Let's put it there. So it's becoming a really cool platform to put things on. Also, something like the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, which is looking at really sort of high-end theoretical particle basically it's a dark matter experiment that's looking out for that. Just a hint at next week's Space Pod a little bit there. And it's a really cool experiment, and they're doing a lot more than just dark matter research with it. They're doing also very high energy particle research that we can't do here on the Earth because of our atmosphere blocking those high energy particles from actually getting in. So when you look at it, the space station is a really good platform to do both Earth observation and also cosmic observation as well.
So many different things. So many different things. And in the chat room, Space Vogel asked, ISS is going to end after 2020, right? They've actually pushed it to extend to 2024. And all of the nations, not the nations, but the agencies who are participating have agreed to go to 2024, except I think the European Space Agency. I think we were still waiting on the European Space Agency. I can't remember if they had decided or not, but all the other partners, NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, all have agreed to continue until at least 2024. And earlier, Katrid asked, let me see, I have to find it again, sorry about this, but asked, was it ever truly meant to be a permanent structure? Or was it meant to be a stepping stone, we talked about that earlier, towards something bigger that would accommodate more research? And yes, I mean, that was the whole point. The plan was to use this type of space station as a stepping stone to further, more lunar missions, human missions to the moon, and eventually to our path to Mars as well. So yes, it is. And even though it's scheduled to deorbit in 2024, and there's still possibilities that it could be pushed a little bit longer, especially with all these different new modules going up. There's actually one more big Russian module that's going to be going up, kind of on the same size as the Zarya or Zvezda module that hopefully will be launching in, I believe the current date is 2018. It was 2017 for a little while. It's been pushed back for years.
It's been delayed a lot.
Yeah, but that still is a piece that is going to be launched before Russia pulls out, and they might eventually take that piece to make a new space station they're calling OPSEC, and that brings into question all the sort of plans for future space stations as well. In my opinion, I would hope that we would slowly bring the International Space Station farther up and put it in the graveyard orbit so that it could be saved, especially because of that $150 billion price tag. I mean, that is a modern wonder of the world, and it would just be such a shame if it would be destroyed.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's sorry. End of space, Mike Grant.
Yeah, that's fine. You're allowed to do them during the show. So, one of the things that I always like to point out about the International Space Station when people are like, it's so useless. Like, there's no real understanding of how it's going to help us get to Mars or things like that. It's from the operations side, which is that it's been operating continuously for almost, over 15 years now. We've had continuous operations on it for 15 years. And a Mars mission is not something that you just launch, you check in every once in a while, and then you see how they're doing, and then let them do their thing, and then check in again. You're going to be continuously monitoring them for 5 years, and then if you're Mars to stay, guess what? You're continuously monitoring them permanently, just like how you would with the International Space Station. So to me, it's more than just the experiments and the medical science and everything with that. It's also the operational aspect of it, which is that you're going to be operating this very big and very complex system for quite a long time. And in addition to that, you've also got the materials as well, that you're learning how do these materials handle being in space for 15, I believe the Zarya module is the one that's been in space for longest, over 17 years. So I believe it was launched in 1998.
So 2 years before the people went on board of it.
Yeah, and especially if they really start to push out the lifetime of the International Space Station, we can kind of learn, how far can we stretch these materials, and then also how can we improve these materials? How can we take these materials that are over 20 years old and see what's not working with them, and how can we make it even better so that they can last even longer? Because they're already exceeding expectations, from what I understand in terms of the space station and its operational length. But that's always been my biggest thing to me, is that operations is so difficult to get correct, especially continuous operations, and that is the most valuable experience I feel from the International Space Station, is that.
Yeah. And all the on-orbit construction, the microgravity construction, all the lessons that we've learned from all of that, there's so many improvements that can be applied to so many future space projects or programs.
Yeah, and it's good to do that too in Earth orbit as opposed to somewhere far out, because I know there's a lot of people that say that you should launch to Mars immediately and we should have just gone straight into it. But also, if you lose your crew on the way to Mars, you could end up losing the will of people as well to do that. So it's better to make the mistakes where you can get back within 45 to 90 minutes as opposed to, they're going to permanently orbit the sun dead. So so a little bit morbid, but that's basically what would happen if something goes wrong catastrophically on the way to Mars. So, yeah.
Another thing that's definitely in my top 5 reasons that the International Space Station is worth it is the whole international aspect of it. I mean, the whole social and political aspect of all these different nations who at one point hated each other and were at war with each other. We're able to cooperate in space and construct this amazing space station and have all of this amazing research done there, which is shared equally among all of the partners in the International Space Station. And, it seems to me that a lot of the kind of invisible borders that exist between nations have been broken down because of the International Space Station. And if for nothing else, that alone has probably led to a lot of future collaboration that'll happen between different nations, and eventually we won't have any borders. And that whole moment that astronauts talk about of wanting to bring leaders up into space to see the fragility of the Earth from there, and realize that there are no borders, that we're all one living on the same planet, and that we need to cooperate. And I think this has paved the way for so many future, just nothing but good things, I think, can come from that.
Yeah, and all around with it. But we've been singing the praises of the International Space Station. Are there some things that we don't particularly care for about the International Space Station?
You mean like how long it took to build, how expensive it is, how the American toilet never seems to work no matter what?
That's very important stuff.
I don't know. One of my favorite sort of items in here to make sure that we sort of went over, at least had some information, excuse me, from Wikipedia. I forget exactly where it is, but it says something along the lines of that the usable space inside the International Space Station is bigger than, you know, a 5-bedroom house or a typical 5-bedroom house, something along those lines. And, you know, it has the 2 bedrooms, a conventional 5-bedroom house. There you go. 2 bathrooms, a gymnasium, and a 360-degree bay window. And all I could think about was, sure, one of those bathrooms never works. So awesome. Now I've got a 5-bedroom house with 1 bathroom in it, and that is horrible. Those are horrible living conditions.
Well,
if
there's
I may.
one thing that
It's
we
a new
know.
house. It has been lived in quite a bit.
Yeah.
That too. Yeah, if there's one thing that we know, it's that Russian bathrooms on spacecraft work extremely well.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing over there, but it's awesome,
Yeah,
apparently.
great job on the engineering of that. So, some very good stuff.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I mean, I guess the argument in theory could be made that we've spent so much money on just building it, and now we're spending so much money on maintaining it, and so much, you know, there's the money issue is always something that seems to come up. You know, what are they doing up there anyway? And really,
Yeah. See,
you
the
know,
biggest criticism,
those sorts of things.
Yeah, the big criticism I always hear about the International Space Station is, oh, well, it's just a stopping point in low Earth orbit, and then you don't go any higher than that. And I mean that's valid. I mean, you're not really going all that high up above the Earth. I mean, you go in like I think it's, what is it, 1,000th of the way to the moon with its orbit. So yeah, that's really not all that high up above the Earth. So yeah, and maybe Space Mike, we could do like what you want to do with it and boost it somewhere. I saw someone in the chat room talked about sending the International Space Station to Mars. How hard could it be? So,
It's totally easable.
I wouldn't want to send it that far. It'd be nice to still have it in Earth orbit.
Yeah, and I think that does bring up a very cool thing, which is that when it does end, you know, obviously we hope we don't dump it in the ocean like what happened with Mir. I know with Mir, they actually did Mir Corp, if I remember correctly, and they tried to do basically...
There was an attempt to save it.
Yeah, there was an attempt to save it. If I remember right, there was an actual commercial mission, technically, sort of, that went up to Mir. It was more, we'll pay you, Russia, in order to fly a mission to have 2 cosmonauts remodify it and make it look a little nicer than it was when you left it, sort of kind of mission. But then they deorbited it because there's lots of politics, International Space Station's coming up, other fun things with it there. But yeah, I really, even with all the negative criticism of the International Space Station, I still feel like it is an extremely important stepping stone with it there. So, very cool stuff. All right.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Bigelow expandable modules.
Yes.
I think that'll be
Space
very
Closet.
cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll be launching on April 8th, pretty soon. So
Yeah. And by the way,
that'll be really
expandable, not inflatable.
Right.
Just want to point out the difference between those two there. It's an expandable module. They're not inflating anything.
Well, yeah, it's hard
so.
to spell beam with an I.
Yeah. There's no I in beam.
There's a lot of different things and different things we could focus on with the International Space Station. So for you guys, the community, if there's anything specific that you want us to explore deeper in some potential space pod material or even a future live show, let us know on social media and in the chat room and give us your ideas for that as well.
Yeah, go ahead and just throw your thoughts into the comments. We love to hear back from you guys. And of course, we always like to highlight really good comments in our next show. And in fact, that is where we are heading right now. We're going to head into break. And when we come back, we are going to have comments from our last show.
We've always looked to the stars. They guide us, give us comfort, help us find our way. We see ourselves out there. When we look up, it inspires us. And we long for something we don't yet know. We yearn to go there. So, we venture forth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. It's one small step for man,
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not.
Many think we stopped exploring. But we know our journey didn't end. We've only just begun.
Orion is functioning perfectly at this point.
Come with us and explore tomorrow.
And welcome back to the show. We always love that trailer. I just love watching it. It just inspires me to go home and do my calculus homework. So, moving on, because we are going to take a look and thank some more patrons that we have for us here today. These are our Patreon Plus subscribers. They have donated $2.50 and up, and they are able to access everything that we put out early, like we were talking about early space pods, After Dark. Oh my gosh, how many times have I said that throughout the show today? So thank you guys so much for donating to us. And of course, how could we forget these patrons as well? These are our wonderful patrons who have donated anywhere from a single penny to $2.49. A single penny gets your name on this show. It doesn't get much better than that, folks. So if you're considering contributing, please do. And you can visit us at patreon.com/TMRO to do so. All right, now we are going to be moving on to your comments for this week. And of course, our subject last week, the speed of space.
Ah, yes, speed of space.
Speed of space. It's very fast.
Here, Ben.
Yes.
That one's for you. That's the only one you're getting. Sorry.
All right, Carrie Ann, go ahead and lead us off into our
goodness.
first comment.
This one comes off of YouTube from Charlie Fox, saying innovation is a steep curve. We went pretty fast, from 1961 to 1969. We are now trying to add 1 to 2% efficiency in modern manufacturing to essentially the rockets of 1965. We will get innovating faster when commercial entities are working in space and looking for inexpensive ways to move out.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to phrase it. Yeah, you know, trying to bring down the cost of things really does help push it forward. Because if you bring down the cost, more people can come to play. And when more people can come to play, you can have more innovation happening. And when more innovation happens, well, you get the idea of what
We're all
ends up
better
happening.
together. More minds are better than one.
All ships rise with the tide.
There you
That's what we
go.
say here at Tomorrow. So very, very cool stuff. All right.
Definitely a lot of commercial entities doing that now, but there needs to be more.
Yes.
Always.
There is never enough involvement in spaceflight from commercial entities as far as we're all concerned. And, you know, government entities too. If anybody wants to join in the game, you know, go ahead, just throw $1 billion or $2 billion and you can get your own space program started.
It's that easy.
It's that easy. Call right now and we can,
United Arab Emirates are doing. So
for 3 payments of $2 billion.
you can have your own space program.
Yeah, maybe we can also get Spot going, the space program of tomorrow,
Yeah.
sometime with that there, of course.
We need those t-shirts.
We'll get that going pretty soon. So, all right, carry
So
on.
funny.
Next comment, please.
Oh, wait, Mike, did you have something to say?
Did you see?
No, I said it was the same. Capcom?
Okay,
Oh,
sorry,
Capcom?
sorry. So, that's me. Also off of YouTube. This one comes from Amber Tiger. And this was a much longer comment, I want to say. So this is kind of a little bit of it, but we figured this is sort of the gist. It says, the major change that's happening over the past decade has been in terms of the organizational structure supporting space activities. We may be still waiting for some of these private entities to build their hardware and launch it, but the fact that these private entities are out there and more empowered to independent action than ever before is important and will erode the ability of the Congress to drag process in space to a halt.
Yes, very good point, which is that when you don't have to deal with with governmental things and all that other fun stuff that comes with it, you can move it a little bit faster. Not necessarily saying that government is slow, but, you know, sometimes it's just not the ideal route to take, I guess is the best way to say it. Space Mike, you're always very passionate about government and space flight. Got anything to think about that comment?
It just all depends on how much involvement there is and how much oversight there is. Like, yes, you do want the government as a customer when it comes to space activities and follow the requirements that they would have for whatever it might be that they want you to do. but not necessarily have 7 different bosses telling you what to do, and have a much more organized and better flow in your chain of command and the whole operational process of going from point A to point B. So
Yep, seven different bosses with 7 different ideas. That can be
Yeah.
a little bad to forward progress sometimes.
and each of them have 4 or 5 bosses as well, and they all want different things. So
Yeah, that's true. We should start Lot.
Yeah.
Lot.
despite all that, the government is doing lots of really good things, and all these flights that have recently taken place wouldn't be happening without them. So can't hate on them too much.
Of course. Yeah, and when I was saying we should start Lot, I was saying we should start the lobbyists of tomorrow. So that way we could maybe get that going. With
Lot
it there.
for Spot.
Lot for Spot.
I'm
That's
a lot for Spot.
There you go. I'm a lot for Spot. There you go. Wow. Can you believe that? That just happened.
Hashtag lot for spot. Oh man, that's awesome.
I'm sure Ben is just having a great time watching the show right now. So we're coming up with all these ideas around him. Do we have a live image of Ben at the moment? Do we have anything?
He's got to be somewhere. I'd
that
imagine.
shows it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Ben is working.
I think I see his pictures on the corner.
Ben is working. I'd love to tell you what he's doing. This is probably live. I like how it also, like, the very, very edges, it sort of looks like the Matrix for some reason. We lost Ben to the system. I'm not sure.
Ben's pictures, he must need to do janitorial work on or something.
Oh. That's
Go on.
You guys, I'm just a little bit worried because this is the picture that he sent just before that. So,
oh, God. Oh, it could be anything.
yeah, he's got an orange jacket. He says power tools. I mean, come on.
They give Ben power tools?
That is
Yeah.
terrible.
They gave
Terrible.
Ben
That's not a safety
tools?
vest for the power tools. That's to protect everyone else from Ben. He knows that, right?
That's so that they can find him when he's done.
Yeah. Well, it happens to the best of us. So, all right. Now that we've really made Ben probably pretty angry, let's go ahead and head on.
It's really great when he's not here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really nice. Dad's away, so the kids get to have a good time. Next comment, please, Capcom.
This one comes also off of YouTube. This is from Taiwan John. I always do that. I apologize. Okay, so I see the convergence between hashtag speed of space, hashtag cosmopolitics, and hashtag moon or Mars first, and the answer is hashtag Mars first on moon. That sounds very scary. There's more to say here, right? Design your hardware for Mars, but test it on the moon. And always repeat, we're just testing this stuff on our way to Mars. In the process, you'll establish a moon colony while making real progress towards Mars. Meanwhile, the public sees people walking on the moon again, boosting social support for space exploration. It is a win-win-win.
Yep, all good stuff. I completely agree with that because
Yep.
I've always said you can come home from the moon, but once you're on the way to Mars, you're on your way to Mars, and yeah, that's not so great if things go wrong. So,
No bueno, as they say.
es no bueno.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. I like that idea.
Pretty cool.
There you go.
Yeah. And moving on to our next comment.
Sounds
Capcom.
interesting when we all agree on things.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's very you guys do such great job commenting because you like pick our brains perfectly and hit exactly what we're trying to say.
That's what I meant to say.
I love you guys.
Okay, one of us needs to be Ben for the rest of the comments and disagree.
All right.
Okay, I will try to disagree with this next one then.
All right, so next comment comes from Patreon. This one comes from Carl Rhodes. I would think that your resistance to the spin-off argument is invalid. It is like the chicken and the egg. Since the spin-off was only created or found as an answer to a problem for space trace. Velcro was invented in the late 1940s and patented in the 1950s, but it did not become a big deal and start getting used until the space program made it popular. That comment really is forward. It's really directed at Ben, as he really does not like the spin-off argument in any way, shape, or form. There you go. And that's basically what Ben would say there.
Here, I'll stand in for Ben. You're wrong.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and the answer is no.
Yeah.
That's usually my argument to him, is that it is very chicken and egg syndrome sort of situation there.
Quite.
And that goes for any sort of big think problem, right? You're talking about trying to get potable water to the ends of the earth. That's a big think problem. And there are some really amazing things that have come out of trying to figure out how to do that. And they don't always necessarily lead to potable water, clean water at the ends of the earth. And sometimes those actually come from space, and sometimes, but when you have any sort of big think item like that, you're going to have a lot of different innovations that don't always apply to what you're trying to do, but sometimes can apply to other things. And space is I think, one of the biggest big think problems that we could possibly have. So, yeah, it is a little chicken egg sort of situation. But
space is the ultimate challenger for everything.
Right?
I mean, it forces you to have to rethink everything every time you go to it. So, and that's what we like about it. It's it's a big challenge, and that is what you need for innovation, and that's very, very cool. All right, Capcom.
Yes, this one comes off of Reddit. Again, it was a little bit of a longer comment, but we kind of snipped some part out of it. This one comes from Mr. Snarky Answer. Says, no way to directly compare chemical rockets to Moore's Law. There's zero chance of many, more than 2 at the most, orders of magnitude improvement in space travel based on chemical rockets. That doesn't mean getting transport to the private sector and optimizing design for cost and reuse can't help a lot, but in the end, you're going to get people disappointed that anything like Moore's Law can be achieved. It isn't the gravity that is hard on some ethereal we can't think enough to get around it. It's the gravity as a constant that cannot be changed. The energy and chemical bonds can't be changed, and the law of conservation of momentum cannot be changed.
Yeah, as the saying goes, physics just doesn't care. Physics is.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get
I don't really
around.
have a problem with rocket technology not really improving as much as people might think, because until we get some sort of anti-gravity, magic Star Trek propulsion, it's not, this is what we have to work with. And I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that everyone keeps saying things like, well, I mean, one day we weren't flying, and then the next day we were flying. Well, there's a lot of other steps that happened in there. And just because you made that one leap doesn't mean that the next leap can happen also what you perceive to be instantaneously as well.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, technological leaps don't happen overnight as well.
Yeah.
Sure, the Wright brothers flew in 1903, and we had a man on the moon in 1969, but that was a 66-year gap. I mean, even the concept of air travel itself wasn't a thing really until just before World War I. So, I mean, it even took just a little over a decade before.
Still been less than 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, even now we still have problems with air travel. Like, the seat is atrociously small, and all the other fun things that come with flying on a plane. So it still is a work in progress, and that's something that we always have to keep in mind, which is that we're always trying to push things as far as physics will allow us to. And really the ultimate barrier, especially in space flight, is physics itself, because you just cannot get around physics, no matter how much we all want to be Gene Roddenberry and just like kick it to warp 9. I'm sorry, but physics says you can't do that. And I really hate to crush nerd dreams, but it's just the way it is.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Peter Jazz in the chat room says the only thing that works like Moore's Law is Moore's Law.
Yeah. That's very true.
That's about it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's 6 months out.
With rocketry too, when you really think about it, I mean, the technology that goes into it took thousands of years to develop, and we're looking at so many different different disciplines. Even medieval alchemy and stuff like that has led to rocket technology. I'm serious. That led to a lot of different rocket fuels.
It very much is. Yeah, it's aerospace engineering, it's mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, software, computer sciences, and also things like project management. Also, humans as well involved in that as well. You have to figure out a way to keep people happy while they're working for you. So, there's so much that goes into making a rocket. It's unbelievable, and that's why I love it. So, all right, Capcom.
I love this next comment because we have been getting this wrong on tomorrow, and I'm very sorry about it.
Here we go.
This is hilarious, and I'm going to modify the way that we say this just ever so slightly. Just bear with me. This one comes off of YouTube. It's from John Potter. You're still saying it wrong. As someone fluent in Italian, let me share how to pronounce it. I lived in Italy for years, long enough to lose my American accent, so I know what I'm saying. Say S-K-Y-A, like ski with an A at the end.
Skia.
Perfect.
Yeah.
P-A-R, like in golf.
Par.
Skiapar.
And Ellie, like the name.
Schiaparelli.
There you
Schiaparelli.
go. The H doesn't
Schiaparelli.
do what you think. In Italian, the H is silent and
Oh.
only used as a separator. So CI written in English would be chi, but CHI, however, is pronounced like key. SCI is pronounced like she, and SCHI is ski.
You mean to tell me that Olive Garden has been lying this entire time?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
stop saying bruschetta. It's bruschetta.
Bruschetta. Actually, I like that. That sounds a lot better than
Yeah,
the way that
bruschetta.
everybody else does it.
Yes,
We're so glad that
Schia-
we've gotten to learn how to pronounce it correctly now. So thank you
Schia-
very much. We're always more than open to hear from you in the comments as to how to pronounce things.
Yeah, we as much as we like hearing that we're right, we also really enjoy hearing that we're wrong.
Yeah, it's fine.
We will totally cop to that in every way.
If we're wrong, you know, and we're more
Please
than happy
tell
to
us.
correct ourselves about that. So yeah, very, very cool stuff.
Oh, too funny.
So
I love it.
Schiaparelli.
Schiaparelli.
Schiaparelli. Schiaparelli.
I'm sure
Schiaparelli.
one of you is right.
Okay.
Schiaparelli.
Let us know in the comments who's pronouncing it right, Space Mike or Jared.
Schiaparelli or
Yeah, oh my gosh, what are we doing with our lives?
Hashtag ISS worth.
Yes.
Or, as some people might misinterpret, is S worth.
Yeah. Also, 1 over alpha, I love that comment. Bets on them forgetting how to pronounce it when it lands. So, yeah, we probably will. But no, we're going to try to...
We're going to try.
We're going to try. So,
Schiaparelli.
yeah, we're going to try. Don't worry, we have until October to get it right. So, yeah, so we have plenty of time. All right. So, I believe that's it for
Yeah.
our show today. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Is Ben going to be back next week?
hurt us and abuse us, and we'll probably be all tied up by the next show.
Right? Yeah. But in the next show, Ben should be back.
Okay,
We'll put it that way.
We'll see what happens.
Right?
And, you could tune in next week and see if I'm still seated here or if Ben is seated here. And I guess we'll find out what happens then. Stay tuned. After Dark is next for all of you Patreon Plus subscribers. So we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.